Okay, so the other day I was going through a bunch of articles, and then one article particularly caught my attention. It was a poll on which country in the whole world was the greatest threat to global peace. So I clicked it, I looked it up, and to my surprise, number one was the U.S. So you're wondering, like, how is this possible? When you think that there are a lot of other countries that would be perceived as a bigger threat, and then as you see, top four was Afghanistan, China, Pakistan, North Korea, and we're number one in the U.S. To think that we beat North Korea and Afghanistan in this poll is pretty alarming. So after seeing this result, I checked what made these countries think that. This poll was done by the Gallup International Poll, which took 68 countries, and they asked which country they thought it was. There were two big reasons. First reason was our meddling with the Middle East, which is a given, and our second is our government spending on military and defense. So today I want to show why we should cut down our budget in our defense and transfer it to transfer it to better places where we could use it. In tackling this idea, I want to go up four different perspectives. One, the international perspective, our economic status as a nation, how it affects us individually, and our steps moving forward. Okay, so first we go international perspective. According to the SIPRI Military Expenditure Database, in 2011 we spent over $711 billion. Now, to understand how much of a difference that is compared to other countries, if you add the next 13 countries, it would add up to 695 billion, not even enough to topple ours. And in those countries involve China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, France, UK, India, and Germany. So now you're thinking, that's a lot of money, but don't we have a lot of money? Aren't we as a nation naturally stable? Well, looking at the economic status of our nation, we are in $18 trillion debt. Now, that's a lot of money. So we owe our money to foreign countries and domestic and federal entities. Now, you might think, how much of the war is affecting that debt? Well, in a survey in nationalpriorities.org, since 2001, we have spent $1.6 trillion on war. Okay. Now, you have to understand how this debt affects us. According to Meg Handley of the U.S. News and World Report, higher debt increases interest rates. It's the main cause of economic decline. It creates weaker job markets and creates higher taxes. Okay, now you're thinking, how about individually? Like, what if you don't care about our nation's debt, you don't care about all that, and you want to see how it affects us? Well, as a country, according to the United States government revenue history, we budget our money to 24% towards defense, 25% towards healthcare, and alarmingly 3% towards education. Now that's pretty crazy, considering that most of the money comes from our pockets when we pay our tax. So, according to the United States government of revenue history, the U.S. collects over $3.7 trillion in tax. And to think that most of that money goes to defense rather than education, which seems like the more logical route, it's kind of mind-boggling that it is that. Okay, now 6 countries: Germany, Finland, France, Norway, Slovenia, and Sweden. What they all have in common is college in those countries are really cheap or free. Now another statistic that's pretty alarming is that what they have in all common, they spend relatively low in defense. It's a small fraction compared to the US. Now, you're wondering, how could we copy those countries? How could we better our education system? Now, it would, according to Bryce Colbert of thinkprogress.org, it would only take $70 billion to make public colleges free for all students. $70 billion when we spend $700 billion on defense. Not even half of the defense money, it's a small fraction. You put that towards education and it made a big difference. Now, let's say you're not a student, and how does this affect you? Well, according to the World Health Organization, in terms of healthcare, the US is ranked 37. The countries that beat us, Germany, Sweden, Canada, Netherlands, is also countries which spend very little on defense, which is another pretty alarming fact that you'd think that we'd pick up on over the years. Now, in conclusion, I'm not saying that we should completely half our budget on defense, or even a third. Simply, even a tenth or even a fifth of that budget given to other priorities can make a big difference. Now, what I've said is only the tip of the iceberg, which further research could enlighten you more. But my goal was just to show you a realization that it's a shame how this country has so much potential, and yet we're not seizing the moment and putting our hard-earned money towards better ends. Finally, I want to leave you with a speech by James Madison, the 4th president of the US in the 18th century. Of all the enemies of liberty, war is perhaps the most dreaded, because it comprises and develops the germ of every other. War is the parent of armies. From these proceeds debts and taxes, which are known as instruments of bringing the many under the domination of the few. No nation could preserve its freedom in the midst of continual warfare.
All right, Alexis, what did you think?
I like how you went into detail about certain things, and the statistics made it more interesting. I think two things you need to work on are maybe not rushing your speech, because you could tell you're kind of nervous, and overall I think you did a good thing.
All right, I think the opening needs to be a little bit stronger, but you had good supporting points and you were pretty consistent about citing information. I thought that you did attempt to put in some persuasive appeals by suggesting how we make sacrifices in other ways in order to spend the money on the defense budget. The comparisons between other countries, of course, there are. It's kind of interesting because I think that when you list all those countries that are not spending as much money, probably more than half of them are countries that are depending upon us to spend the money. And I mean, that's been one of those arguments for years, that we are basically paying for the military for most of Europe and Southeast Asia and places like that. And as a consequence, I think there's a good argument to be made here that people should be sharing the burden, but your perspective on it seems to be going the other direction, and I think that you miss a little bit of a trick there, an opportunity to maybe build up even more support, even from people that think that we need to spend that much money on defense, by putting it in that context. The education spending thing, the 3% that you talk about, that's in the federal budget. Most education, of course, is paid for by the states, but the idea of public colleges and universities being free, $70 billion, you got to explain. By the way, free means that you're not paying the tuition, you're paying for it in some other way, and you need to explain why paying for it in another way is more acceptable. In this particular case, you're suggesting cuts in the military budget, but you're not very specific about what kinds of cuts there ought to be. What programs are wasteful or unnecessary? What equipment are we investing in that we don't need? How big should our Army be or our military be? We don't really get any kind of comparison on those issues. And the security issue just never gets discussed at all. So I think that that's the big reservation that people might have in worrying about reductions on spending on the military. I agree with Alexis. I think the pacing's a little bit awkward. Sometimes it sounds like you are hesitant in the transition. Sometimes it sounds like you're rushing. I do think that you tend to look at the audience most of the time, and I think that helps quite a bit in building some credibility for you. All right, thank you.